Hi everybody, my name is Nick and I'm the owner of Key Collector Comics, the free mobile app on Google Play and Apple. Today I'm going to tell you how an ordinary man becomes immortal. And of course, I'm talking about Stan Lee, who passed away November 12, 2018. Stan had an amazing career, goes without saying. But there's something truly magical that happened at the end of his career, and it has to do with a key issue. I'm going to tell you about it towards the end of the video, so stick around for that. There he is, Stan the Man Lee. And usually old guys aren't that kind with their hand gestures, but you know what we loved about Stan was that he was forever young, even though he seemed forever old, because as long as I can remember Stan Lee, he was always this white-haired, tinted glasses guy who'd say things like, "Nuff said," and "Excelsior" in this gravelly voice, and you didn't know what the hell he was talking about, but it was fun. But he was a boy at one time, and there's proof right here. No, there's proof. Couple quick facts about Stan. He was born Stanley Martin Lieber in 1922 in New York City. He liked reading books, not comics. How dare he? He worked through high school. He actually wrote obituaries. This was during the time of the Great Depression. So when he graduated high school, through family relations, he found a job at Timely Comics, which became Atlas and then became Marvel. There's Joe Simon in the middle. On the right, that's Steve Ditko. And all the way to the left, there's Jack Kirby and Stan Lee. And if you're having problems recognizing Stan Lee here, I hope this helps. In 1941, he got his first story published in Captain America Comics #3. It was a 2-page, all-text story called Captain America Foils the Traitor's Revenge, whatever that means. But in this story, he introduced shield throwing, which hits an enemy and boomerangs back to him, which is still used today. Stan joined the Army in 1942, where he served stateside. He was a playwright writing training manuals. Two of the colleagues that he served with were Frank Capra, who wrote It's a Wonderful Life, and Theodore Seuss Geisel, who we know as Dr. Seuss. Even while in the Army, Stan was still writing and publishing comics. They were all genre-specific, like you see here, romance and funny animals and anything that was popular at the time, westerns, war. Actually, here's Stan on the cover of Black Rider #8. That's a photograph of Stan. And it was during this time that the Seduction of the Innocents book was published, which was a direct attack on comics by Dr. Frederick Wortham. It gave way to the Comics Code, which placed a lot of restrictions on the stories that were being told. And Stan felt discouraged. He wasn't enjoying it. He actually wanted to quit. And it was in that when Martin Goodman, the Timely publisher, noticed DC was having success with the Justice League of America. And he came to Stan and he said, "Look, we need to do something like this." And Stan said, "All right, okay, I'll do it. But I'm going to do it my way." And he did. And they created these characters that they were a dysfunctional family. And they weren't always right. But they loved each other, but they had problems. And it was something that people could relate to. It was a huge hit. Stan feels invigorated. He's tap dancing down the hall, at Timely. He's writing himself into books like anybody cares about the writer and the artist. And these books are a big hit. People want superheroes. So Marvel recognizes that. They go, "You want superheroes? We'll give you superheroes." And that's where it all begins. So Tales to Astonish 27 comes out. This scientist, Hank Pym, he shrinks himself down, but he didn't check around and see if there was an anthill before he did it. That's the first page. So he's getting pursued by ants. And people like this character. They want more of him, so they bring him back in 35, and they bring him back as Ant-Man. And he's a superhero. He made peace with the ants. I guess he said, "Hey, I know there's a Cheeto somewhere over there. If you guys leave me alone." And we all know Hank Pym. He becomes Giant Man and Goliath and Yellow Jacket and a wife beater. And speaking of which, you have Tales to Astonish 42, and they bring in the Wasp. And she is there. She's saving Hank Pym, although it says she's in peril. The Incredible Hulk #1. And Stan was inspired by literature. This is a mix between Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and Frankenstein. He's a real mess. One issue he's gray, the next he's green, and he's going crazy, ripping everything up. And there's the first page to The Incredible Hulk. I thought you'd enjoy seeing that. Next, we have Journey into Mystery 83, and they bring in Thor. And Jack Kirby had done a version of Thor earlier. It was more traditional Norse mythology. But then Stan's like, "I want him blonde. I want him with a red cape." Then we have Amazing Fantasy 15, and this was difficult for Stan to get the publisher Martin Goodman to agree with because all of the younger characters were sidekicks at the time. And here comes Stan. He's like, yeah, I want to do this character, Spider-Man, and he's a teenager. And Martin's like, what? Well, why are we calling him man then? And then, Stan's bugging him. And finally, Martin was like, look, go ahead. Just, you know what? We're going to end this title. So go ahead and put your stupid Spider-Man character in it and stop bugging me about it. And I don't know what's going behind those tinted glasses if you're giving me dirty looks, but the 70s isn't for another decade, pal, so why don't you just get rid of those? And Spider-Man is a huge hit, as we know. It's this teenager, he's got problems, and now he's got powers, and now he needs to take responsibility for those powers. So that's a big thing for them, and Stan pretty much has creative freedom, and he's a little bit cocky. So he comes out with this character, Tony Stark, Iron Man, in Tales of Suspense 39, and he makes him everything that his target audience hates. He's a rich industrialist, and he's a warmonger, but they love it. And maybe he was trying to piss off the hippies, because there's been panels that Stan has written where he's got his characters lecturing these hippies, but they love him. And maybe because Stark was, again, a conflicted character who at some point, I know he battled alcoholism. Maybe these hippies were like, hey, man, we could probably put our differences aside for a bit because I've had substance abuse problems too. So the next big hit that's still around today is Sergeant Fury, Nick Fury, and his Howling Commandos #1 in May of 1963. Stan goes to Martin Goodman and says, hey, look, this method that Kirby and I created, this Marvel method, could work with anything. It could work with anything an outdated war theme with a horrible title, and I'm going to prove it. So the Marvel method is basically the writer and the artist co-plot the story, and then the artist does all of the art, and then the writer comes in and he retrofits in the dialogue. And sure enough, this is something that worked. We have Strange Tales 110, Doctor Strange. This is a different character than what Stan has been putting out there, and there's a reason why. In a 1963 letter to this guy, Jerry Bales, who was a historian of sorts in the field of comics, he writes, well, we have a new character in the works for Strange Tales. It's just a 5-page filler. The guy's name's Doctor Strange. Steve Ditko is going to draw him. It has sort of a black magic theme. The first story is nothing great, but maybe we can make something of it. It was Steve's idea, and I figured we'd give it a chance. Although, again, we had to rush it. It's not much. So, he's laying it out there like this is going to be crap because Steve did it. But, it was a hit again, and it was a hit probably. It was actually big with the counterculture hippies that were like, oh, man, I need some blotter acid to read this. Maybe Jack Kirby could draw me a blacklight poster of Doctor Strange, man. And now the Avengers. Oh my God, the Avengers! And this was a happy accident. This wasn't planned. What happened was Daredevil was a character back in the 1940s from a publisher named Lev Gleason, and the copyright on the character had lapsed, so it was available. And Martin Goodman goes in, he grabs it, he's like, "Oh, we got to do this. We got to put this out." And they rushed it. They wanted to rush it to market, but they couldn't make it in time that they wanted to. So they had to squeeze a book in to their schedule. And Stan was like, you know what? Let's just take these characters, throw them into a super group called the Avengers. We'll put that book out, buy ourselves some time so we could come out with Daredevil with a little bit more time. And that is how the Avengers came about. It's crazy, right? And that's the first page right there. With Loki. He's got a real Roman nose. Then we have the X-Men. And the X-Men were not a bit... This is right up Stan's alley. He likes the teenage stuff with the conflict. You got this 45-year-old guy writing about teenagers. He's really connected to his audience. But this wasn't a big hit until Claremont really came on the scene. But... here you go. Here's the first page of the X-Men. And, Xavier's like, I hate these kids. You got Beast jumping in through the window with his foot right in Xavier's face. And then you get Iceman. He's just he's just pole dancing right there, North Pole dancing. It's just such a strange page. But that's what, that's why we love this stuff. And there's Cyclops. He's a geek. He's like, hi, Cyclops, I'm present, accounted for. And here we have Tales of Suspense number 52, the first appearance of Black Widow. And there she is. And she's gorgeous, too. Everybody's gorgeous. Stan loves the ladies. And there was actually another Black Widow that came out before this one. Her name was Clairvoyant, which is just so clever. But this one was based off of Boris and Natasha from the Rocky and Bullwinkle show. A lot of those villains at the time were communists because it was the height of the Cold War, and we were up against the Dirty Reds, and that's what they called them. But she hung around, and at one point she enlisted Hawkeye. So brought that character into the fold as well. And here we have Fantastic Four number 52, September 1966. This is the first appearance of Black Panther. This is the first black superhero with Marvel. And it was really Stan and Jack were both very into diversity, and they were really about breaking down a lot of these walls. This was a bold move because just a few months earlier, the Black Panther Party was founded by Stan. Just kidding. And people were afraid of it. Stan did this. He was quoted as saying, "At that point, I felt we really needed a black superhero, and I wanted to get away from a common perception. 'Nuff said." Now, I hope you're still watching, and if you are, there's a couple more key issues and then the ultimate key issue. But I just wanted to invite you to check out Key Collector. There's a Stan Lee feature right now. It's a free app. And that's really what the Key Collector Comics app does, is that it focuses on those milestone moments in comic book history that are significant. So it is a resource that is concise, that allows people to easily digest this information. You know, it's not all about money. Hey, I want to find a big, expensive comic book and be rich. No, it's a historian. It's using today's technology to chronicle comic book history. This is an interesting issue, Mr. Miracle number 6. Now, Jack and Stan, they didn't always get along, and they had their disagreements. It's fairly public. So Jack went to work for DC, and he started the New Gods world. And here is one character that he introduced. His name is the Funky Flash Man. And this is supposed to be Stan Lee. Okay, here's a picture of the two of them side by side. Stan Lee always looks different. I don't understand. It's like I would... that, to me, I have no idea who that is. It could be anybody. But Funky Flashman was just like his name suggests. He's just a bragging, just totally self-serving kind of guy. And Jack really gave it to him in this issue. And he also gave it to Martin Goodman, who is right there being held by the neck by Funky Flashman. And he didn't have the best things to say. But they, at the end, when they were older, before Jack died, I know that they made some peace together, which is good. Here's a couple other issues I just wanted to go through. Marvel Age, there's a couple interviews, and Stan's there on the cover. Here he is on the left with Jim Shooter. And these books are now very valuable. Foom, number 17, more interview books. This one's interesting. Comic Reader, number 179. There was an April Fool's joke in 1980 where they were saying that he passed away. So Comic Reader probably feels pretty bad right now 38 years later. Shame on you guys. So this is what I was talking about earlier. This issue right here is the final issue that Stan Lee wrote for Marvel. What's crazy about it is that the very first issue he wrote in Captain America Comics number 3, how it was all text, now all these years later, they asked him to take that text and adapt it into a traditional comic book panel so that Bruce Timm could draw it. And that was his final issue. So his first and his last issue that he wrote were the same story. And I think that's amazing. It's a great bookend to a life that has a library of books between them. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it was fun. And please download Key Collector Comics and learn more about comic books. And please spread the word and have a great life like Stan did. Excelsior!